Beneath the deceptive calm of a world at war, amidst the thunderous chaos of battlefields and the shadowy corridors of power, there existed a relentless undercurrent of defiance against one of history's most infamous tyrants, Adolf Hitler. The story of the numerous assassination attempts on Hitler's life weaves through the fabric of the Third Reich's reign, a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who sought to halt the march of tyranny. From the early days of Hitler's rise to power in the 1930s until the dying embers of the Second World War in 1945, no less than 42 documented plots emerged from the shadows, each one a daring bid to change the course of history. These attempts were as varied in their execution as they were in their origin, ranging from solitary gunmen to elaborate explosives, and involving a cast of characters from disillusioned military officers to ordinary citizens moved to extraordinary acts of courage. One of the most famous of these plots unfolded on July 20th, 1944, the Valkyrie operation led by Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg. With a briefcase bomb planted at Hitler's Wolf's Lair conference room, Stauffenberg sought to obliterate the Nazi leadership. Yet, fate intervened, and Hitler miraculously survived, the briefcase having been moved behind a leg of the conference table, which deflected the blast's lethal force. Among the other notable attempts was the ingenious plot by Henning von Tresckow, a major figure within the German military resistance. In March 1943, Tresckow and his co-conspirators devised a plan to assassinate Hitler using a bomb disguised as 2 bottles of Cointreau. This explosive package was to be transported on Hitler's plane, with the expectation that the resulting detonation would kill the Führer mid-flight. Each plot, whether foiled by misfortune, betrayal, or the Führer's uncanny luck, adds a layer of intrigue and desperation to the fight against Nazi tyranny. Can you fathom the courage it took to stand against such overwhelming odds, knowing that the price of failure was not just personal death, but potentially the deaths of loved ones and the further emboldenment of a monstrous regime? As Mahatma Gandhi resonated deeply, "When I despair, I remember that all through history the way of truth and love has always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they can seem invincible, but in the end, they always fall. Think of it, always." This sentiment echoes poignantly through the tales of those who dared to challenge Hitler directly, their legacy a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of evil. Join us as we delve into the shadows of conspiracy, courage, and close calls, exploring the untold stories of the men and women who risked everything to stop a dictator. Welcome to the Diary of Julius Caesar, a prelude to infamy, the early years and ascension of Adolf Hitler. In the annals of history, Adolf Hitler's ascension to power is a stark reminder of how personal ambition can exploit societal disarray, weaving a narrative as dark and complex as the tapestry of history itself. Born on April 20th, 1889, in Braunau am Inn, a small town perched on the Austro-German border, Hitler's early life was steeped in the austere discipline of his father, Alois, a customs official, and the nurturing care of his mother, Clara. The loss of his father in 1903 and his mother's demise to breast cancer in 1907 plunged Hitler into a maelstrom of grief and uncertainty, leaving him orphaned in his late teens and setting the stage for a tumultuous path ahead. Dreams of artistic glory led a young Adolf to Vienna, a vibrant cultural hub, yet the Academy of Fine Arts rejection in 1907 and again in 1908 crushed his aspirations. Vienna became both his home and his ideological crucible, as he encountered anti-Semitic and nationalist currents. Struggling to survive, he was deeply influenced by the writings of German nationalist Georg Ritter von Schönerer and the anti-Semitic mayor Karl Lueger. Hitler later reflected on this period as foundational, famously stating in Mein Kampf, "Vienna was and remained for me the hardest but most thorough school of my life. In this period, I formed my first world political ideas." World War I was the crucible that forged Hitler's iron will. Volunteering for the Bavarian army, he found purpose amidst the chaos of battle. His bravery in the face of adversity, including being wounded at the Battle of the Somme in 1916 and temporarily blinded by a gas attack in October 1918, earned him the Iron Cross, First Class. Yet the war's end brought not peace, but despair. Germany's defeat and the punitive Treaty of Versailles of 1919 became the spectre haunting Hitler, fueling a deep resentment and a vow for retribution. The post-war years were a time of upheaval in Germany. Amidst this chaos, Hitler discovered his talent for oratory, joining the German Workers' Party in 1919. By 1921, he had assumed control, transforming it into the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party. His early forays into politics were marked by a failed coup, the Munich beer hall Putsch of November 8, 1923. This attempt to seize power landed him in prison, yet it was during his incarceration in Landsberg prison that he penned Mein Kampf, laying out his vision for Germany's future and cementing his anti-Semitic ideology. This period was marked by reflection and strategizing. As Hitler noted, "He alone, who owns the youth, gains the future." Upon his release, Hitler exploited the economic turmoil of the Great Depression, casting the Nazi Party as the beacon of hope for a beleaguered nation. His speeches, charged with fervor and promises of revival, drew massive crowds. The pivotal year of 1930 saw the Nazis become the second largest party in the Reichstag, setting the stage for Hitler's ascent to power. His appointment as Chancellor on January 30, 1933, by President Paul von Hindenburg was the culmination of a meticulously orchestrated political maneuver, exploiting the fear and instability that had gripped the nation. His own words from Mein Kampf encapsulate this journey. "What luck for rulers that men do not think." The shadowed path, the meteoric ascent of the Nazi Party. In the tumultuous aftermath of World War I, Germany found itself adrift in a sea of political upheaval and economic despair. It was against this backdrop of national desolation that the Nazi Party, originally known as the German Workers' Party, was born. The year was 1919, a time when the streets of Munich were rife with discontent and the air thick with the demand for change. Into this milieu stepped Adolf Hitler, a man whose destiny would become inextricably linked with the narrative of the Nazi Party and whose influence would steer the course of history onto a path marked by darkness and despair. The formation of the Nazi Party can be traced back to January 5, 1919, when Anton Drexler, a railway locksmith, along with several other nationalist and anti-Semitic members, founded the DAP. Initially, the party was one of many small political groups vying for influence in a fractured post-war Germany. However, the entry of Hitler into the party later that year marked the beginning of a transformation that would see the DAP evolve from obscurity into the forefront of German politics. Hitler, with his electrifying oratory skills and deep understanding of the power of propaganda, quickly became the driving force behind the party's rebranding as the National Socialist German Workers' Party in 1920. Under his direction, the party adopted the swastika, an ancient symbol intended to represent racial purity and national rebirth, as its emblem. Hitler famously proclaimed, "We choose red for our posters after careful and thorough reflection to provoke the left wing, to drive them to indignation and lead them to attend our meetings if only to break them up, so that in this way we get a chance of talking to the people." The core beliefs of the Nazi Party were encapsulated in the 25-point program announced in February 1920. This manifesto laid the foundation for a party that was fiercely nationalistic, anti-Semitic, anti-Marxist, and anti-democratic. It called for the unification of all Germans in a greater Germany, the abrogation of the Treaty of Versailles, and the exclusion of Jews from German society, among other things. These principles struck a chord with a populace that was searching for a scapegoat for its humiliation and hardship, and they provided a simple yet compelling narrative around which Hitler could rally support. He declared, "What we have to fight for is the necessary security for the existence and increase of our race and people, the subsistence of its children, and the maintenance of our racial stock unmixed, the freedom and independence of the fatherland." Hitler's leadership was characterized by a mesmerizing blend of charismatic authority and strategic acumen. He was a master at manipulating public opinion, using mass rallies, speeches, and the party's newspaper, the Völkischer Beobachter, to spread the Nazi message. His ability to tap into the fears and hopes of the German people, to present himself as the only leader capable of restoring Germany's lost glory, was unparalleled. One of Hitler's most famous quotes from this period, "Give me 5 years and you will not recognize Germany," reflects the transformative vision he promised, a vision that was both seductive and terrifying in its implications. Shadows and echoes, the Munich beer hall, Putsch, and the genesis of betrayal. In the tumultuous wake of Germany's defeat in World War I, a country battered by loss and the humiliating terms of the Treaty of Versailles became the breeding ground for political extremism. Munich, the heart of Bavaria, became a focal point of unrest, where Adolf Hitler, a figure emerging from the shadows of post-war disillusionment, sought to carve his destiny. The Munich beer hall Putsch in November 1923, a pivotal moment in Hitler's early political career, was not merely a failed coup. It was a dramatic proclamation of his intentions and a stark illustration of betrayal that would come to define his rule. The story begins in the volatile atmosphere of Munich, a city teeming with political unrest and ripe for the kind of dramatic action that Hitler and his nascent Nazi party envisioned. The Putsch was conceived as a bold strike against the Weimar Republic, which Hitler and his followers blamed for Germany's humiliation in the war and its aftermath. The plan was to kidnap Gustav von Kahr, the State Commissioner of Bavaria, along with other key officials, and force them to support a march on Berlin to overthrow the government. The stage was set on the evening of November 8, 1923, at the Bürgerbraukeller, a large beer hall in Munich, where Gustav von Kahr, the Bavarian State Commissioner, was making an address. With a swift and audacious move, Hitler and his paramilitary cohort, the SA, orchestrated by Ernst Röhm, stormed the hall. Amid the confusion, Hitler mounted a table, fired a shot into the ceiling and declared, "The government is overthrown." This bold declaration was meant to signal the start of a national revolution, with Munich as the epicenter. Hitler's audacity was palpable as he proclaimed to the bewildered audience, "I have 4 bullets in this gun, 3 for the traitors and 1 for myself." Yet, the grandiose plans of the night quickly unraveled. Von Kahr, along with other key figures like Otto von Lossow and Hans von Seisser, initially seemed to acquiesce to Hitler's demands under duress. However, once released, they orchestrated a swift counteraction against the Putschists. The following day, as Hitler and approximately 2,000 followers marched towards the center of Munich in a bold but ill-fated attempt to seize power, they were met with armed resistance. The ensuing confrontation was brief yet bloody, leading to the deaths of 16 Nazis and 4 police officers. Hitler himself was injured and fled the scene, only to be arrested 2 days later. The Putsch was a fiasco, but it marked a turning point for Hitler and the Nazi Party. The trial that followed in early 1924 became a platform for Hitler to broadcast his views, receiving widespread media coverage. Despite the treason charge, he was sentenced to only 5 years in Landsberg prison, of which he served less than 9 months. It was during this time that he dictated Mein Kampf to Rudolf Hess, outlining his ideology and future plans for Germany. Reflecting on the Putsch, Hitler realized the power of propaganda and the need for legal, rather than violent, means to seize power. He famously remarked, "We will have to hold our noses and enter the Reichstag against the Catholic and Marxist deputies." Reflecting on the Putsch, Hitler recognized the futility of violence for achieving power, famously remarking, "Any further attempt to gain power by force must lead to failure." This realization signified a strategic pivot towards seeking power through ostensibly legal means, marking a new chapter in his political strategy. The sense of betrayal felt by Hitler during the Putsch, particularly by von Kahr and other officials who had appeared to support the uprising only to oppose it, deeply influenced his future leadership style. It instilled in him a profound distrust of others, leading to a regime characterized by loyalty tests, purges, and the elimination of those perceived as threats or traitors. Twilight of the Titans, the Night of the Long Knives. In the shadowed corridors of history, few events are as emblematic of the treachery of power as the Night of the Long Knives. Orchestrated by Adolf Hitler from June 30th to July 2nd, 1934, this brutal purge not only silenced the Sturmabteilung, but also extinguished the last flickers of opposition within the Nazi Party. It was a clear message. In Hitler's Germany, loyalty was provisional, and betrayal, a calculated strategy for survival and dominance. The seeds of this night were sown in the early days of the Nazi regime. The Sturmabteilung, a paramilitary organization led by Ernst Röhm, had been a key force in Hitler's ascent. Their numbers and zeal had bolstered the Nazis' street credibility and played a pivotal role in intimidating opponents. Yet, as the Nazis secured their grip on Germany, the SA's radicalism and Röhm's ambitions became liabilities. Röhm envisioned the SA as the new army, a prospect that alarmed the Reichswehr, the German military, and conservative elites who were essential to Hitler's base of support. Furthermore, Röhm's outspokenness on socialistic redistribution of wealth and his calls for a second revolution posed a direct challenge to Hitler's authority and the party's cohesion. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown. In the weeks leading up to the purge, Hitler, swayed by Heinrich Himmler, Hermann Göring, and other top Nazis who saw Röhm as a threat, decided to act. Propaganda and strategic misinformation painted the SA leadership as traitors, plotting against Hitler. The pretext for the purge was meticulously crafted. The SA's potential coup d'état was a narrative sold to both the Nazi leadership and the German public. On the night of June 30th, 1934, Hitler and his loyal SS units sprung into action. The Führer personally flew to Munich and led a raid on a hotel in Bad Wiessee, where Röhm and his top aides were arrested. What followed was a nationwide crackdown that extended beyond the SA leadership to include Hitler's political adversaries, conservative critics, and those perceived as threats within the party itself. Among the notable victims were Gregor Strasser, a former Nazi leader and early rival, Kurt von Schleicher, the last Chancellor of the Weimar Republic, and many others who had fallen out of favor with Hitler's vision for Germany. The executions were carried out with chilling efficiency. Röhm, once a close friend and ally of Hitler, was offered a pistol with a single bullet for a solitary end. When he refused, he was shot by 2 SS officers. The purge claimed the lives of at least 85 people, though some estimates suggest the number could be in the hundreds. The Night of the Long Knives not only decimated the SA as a political force, but also signaled the end of any semblance of opposition within the Nazi ranks. Hitler had demonstrated that he would tolerate no dissent, no challenge to his supreme authority. Hitler's justification for the massacre was chilling in its frankness. Addressing the Reichstag, he declared, "In this hour, I was responsible for the fate of the German people, and thereby I became the supreme judge of the German people." This proclamation was a stark declaration of Hitler's autocratic stance, positioning himself as the sole arbiter of justice and the nation's destiny. The German public, largely swayed by the government's narrative, accepted Hitler's actions. Internationally, the purge was met with shock but little intervention, as many countries were still grappling with their own internal issues and the complexities of diplomatic relations with the increasingly powerful Nazi regime. Shadows over September, the Oster Conspiracy of 1938. In the tumultuous years leading up to the Second World War, a plot that could have altered the course of history was silently brewing within the heart of Nazi Germany. This was not a story of espionage and sabotage by foreign agents, but a tale of defiance from within the ranks of the German military. At the epicenter of this clandestine rebellion was General Major Hans Oster, a figure whose loyalty to his country transcended his allegiance to its Führer. The plan, which came to be known as the Oster Conspiracy or the September Conspiracy, was a daring gambit to overthrow Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime to prevent a war that its architects believed Germany was ill-prepared to fight. The seeds of the conspiracy were sown in fear and disillusionment. Oster, the deputy head of the Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence, observed with growing alarm as Hitler's aggressive policies edged Germany closer to a conflict over the Sudetenland, a territory in Czechoslovakia with a significant ethnic German population. Oster, along with a cadre of high-ranking Wehrmacht officers and conservatives, viewed Hitler's expansionist ambitions as a precipice from which there would be no return. Among them were luminaries such as Generaloberst Ludwig Beck, Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, and Generalleutnant Erwin von Witzleben, each a pillar in their respective branches of the German military, united by a common cause: to save Germany from the brink of disaster. The blueprint of their resistance was as audacious as it was fraught with peril. The conspirators planned to storm the Reich Chancellery, arresting or, if necessary, assassinating Hitler. The void left by his removal was to be filled by a restored monarchy under Prince Wilhelm of Prussia, envisaged as a bulwark against the chaos of Nazi rule. The execution of the plot hinged on a delicate balance of military precision and political maneuvering, with Count Hans-Jürgen von Blumenthal tasked with leading the charge against the Chancellery. Yet for all its meticulous planning, the conspiracy was doomed by the winds of diplomacy. The British Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, pursued appeasement with Hitler, culminating in the Munich Agreement, which allowed Germany to annex the Sudetenland without firing a shot. The agreement, hailed in Germany as a diplomatic victory, bolstered Hitler's standing and effectively dismantled the foundation upon which the Oster Conspiracy rested. Hitler was celebrated as a statesman who had expanded the Reich without bloodshed, and the shadow of war receded, for the moment. The aftermath of the failed plot saw its architects disheartened but not defeated. They continued to serve in their official capacities, their dissent undiminished by the setback. Oster, in particular, remained a thorn in the side of the Nazi regime, using his position within the Abwehr to aid Jews in escaping from Germany. This act of defiance, however, would not go unpunished. In 1943, the Gestapo's net began to close around the conspirators, leading to Oster's arrest and eventual execution in the waning days of the war alongside Canaris and others at Flossenburg concentration camp. Echoes of defiance, Georg Elser, and the Munich beer hall bomb plot. Amidst the darkening shadows of impending global conflict and the tightening grip of tyranny under Adolf Hitler's regime, a solitary figure of defiance emerged, embodying the indomitable spirit of resistance. This is the story of Johann Georg Elser, a carpenter from Königsbrunn, whose audacious plot to assassinate Hitler at a Munich beer hall in November 1939 marked one of the earliest attempts on the Führer's life. It was an act driven by moral conviction, a solitary campaign against the machinery of oppression, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation in the heart of Nazi Germany. Georg Elser, and a political craftsman with a keen sense of justice, watched with growing alarm as Hitler's policies plunged Germany and Europe into turmoil. Disturbed by the regime's brutal suppression of dissent and the aggressive expansionism that threatened to engulf the continent in war, Elser resolved to take drastic action. His target was the annual gathering at the Bürgerbräukeller in Munich on November 8th, commemorating the 1923 beer hall Putsch, an event that Hitler never failed to attend. He famously declared, "I considered it my duty to prevent, if possible, the outbreak of the Second War by eliminating the two dictators." The meticulous planning of Elser's plot reflected both his technical skill and profound determination. Over the course of several months leading up to November 1939, Elser painstakingly prepared for the assassination attempt. By night, he visited the beer hall, laboriously hollowing out a cavity in a pillar behind the speaker's podium, where Hitler would deliver his address. Into this hidden chamber, Elser planted a bomb, rigged with a timer set to detonate at 9:20 p.m. on November 8, 1939, a moment calculated with precision to coincide with Hitler's speech. Elser's plot, however, was thwarted by a twist of fate that spared Hitler's life and altered the course of history. On the day of the planned assassination, Hitler unexpectedly decided to leave the beer hall earlier than planned, driven by concerns over weather conditions that threatened his travel arrangements. The bomb exploded as intended at 9:20 p.m., but Hitler had departed a mere 13 minutes earlier, escaping unscathed. The blast claimed 8 lives and injured over 60 individuals, but its intended target remained beyond its reach. The aftermath of the explosion triggered a frantic manhunt, leading to Elsa's arrest at the Swiss border, carrying evidence of his involvement. Under interrogation by the Gestapo, Elsa confessed to acting alone, motivated by a desire to halt Hitler's destructive policies. His stoic bravery, in the face of certain death, left an indelible mark on those who encountered him. Heinrich Himmler, upon meeting Elsa, reportedly expressed astonishment at the carpenter's solitary effort, remarking on the profound impact of such a determined individual. Himmler is reported to have said in disbelief, "If I had a man like Elsa, I could conquer the world." Elsa's final years were marked by imprisonment and suffering. He was detained in the notorious concentration camps of Sachsenhausen and later Dachau, enduring the harshest of conditions until his execution in April 1945, just days before the collapse of the Third Reich and the liberation of the camps. His last moments were a stark reflection of the price of his audacity, a solitary figure facing the executioner's bullet with the same resolve that had driven him to act against Hitler. The Titan's Gambit, Unraveling Operation Barbarossa. In the grand chessboard of World War II, one move stands out for its audacity and its profound betrayal: Operation Barbarossa, the code name for Nazi Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union. This monumental military campaign, launched on June 22, 1941, not only marked the largest invasion force in the annals of warfare, but also the shattering of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression treaty signed between Germany and the Soviet Union in 1939. The operation was a testament to Adolf Hitler's strategic ambition and ideological fervor, a gambit that would ultimately lead to the cataclysm of the Eastern Front. The roots of Operation Barbarossa lie deep in Hitler's worldview, a toxic blend of expansionist ambition and anti-Bolshevik ideology encapsulated in his manifesto, Mein Kampf. Hitler had long envisioned the conquest of the Soviet Union as a cornerstone of his plan for Lebensraum, or living space, for the Aryan race. The vast expanses of the Soviet Union were to provide the soil in which the German people would flourish, free from the constraints of a crowded Europe. This ideological conviction, coupled with a deep-seated hatred for communism, which he considered a Jewish conspiracy against the Germanic people, fueled Hitler's determination to turn eastward. He famously declared, "We have only to kick in the door, and the whole rotten structure will come crashing down." The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, signed on August 23, 1939, by the foreign ministers of Germany and the Soviet Union, Joachim von Ribbentrop and Vyacheslav Molotov, respectively, was a pragmatic arrangement for Hitler. It secured the Eastern Front's neutrality, allowing him to focus his military might on the conquest of Western Europe without fear of a two-front war. However, this treaty was always viewed by Hitler as a temporary measure, a strategic delay on the path to his true objective, the defeat of the Soviet Union. The planning for Operation Barbarossa was as meticulous as it was ambitious. Hitler mobilized over 3 million German soldiers, along with significant contingents from Allied Axis powers, into 3 principal army groups targeting Leningrad in the north, Moscow in the center, and the oil-rich Caucasus in the south. The sheer scale of the invasion, coupled with the initial success of the German blitzkrieg tactics, caught the Soviet Union off guard, resulting in staggering losses and the rapid advance of German forces. However, the ideological underpinnings of the campaign also dictated its execution. The invasion was not merely a military operation, but an ideological crusade against Bolshevism. The infamous Commissar Order, which called for the summary execution of Soviet political commissars, and the General Plan Ost, which envisaged the systematic depopulation and colonization of Eastern Europe, were stark indicators of the genocidal intent behind the campaign. Hitler's declaration to his generals that the war against the Soviet Union would be a war of annihilation underscored the merciless nature of the Eastern Front. This is a war of ideologies and racial differences, and will have to be conducted with unprecedented, unmerciful, and unrelenting harshness. The betrayal of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact ushered in a conflict of unimaginable scale and savagery, reshaping the contours of World War II. The initial triumphs of the Wehrmacht gave way to the vastness of the Russian winter and the indomitable spirit of the Soviet people. The siege of Stalingrad, from August 23, 1942 to February 2, 1943, became the turning point, a grueling encounter that ended in a catastrophic defeat for the Sixth Army, epitomizing the folly of Hitler's ambitions. Operation Barbarossa was more than a military blunder. It was a profound miscalculation that stemmed from Hitler's ideological obsessions and overconfidence. The invasion broke the fragile détente between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, transforming Stalin's regime from a cautious ally into a determined foe. It was a campaign that sought to reshape the European order, but instead led to the erosion of the Third Reich's military might and hastened its downfall. Shadows of Valkyrie, the plot to overthrow a tyrant. In the annals of resistance against tyranny, few tales are as compelling and tragic as Operation Valkyrie, the audacious plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler and overthrow the Nazi regime from within. Orchestrated by a group of high-ranking German officers, disillusioned with Hitler's catastrophic leadership, the conspiracy reached its climax on July 20, 1944, with Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg at its heart. Operation Valkyrie was more than an assassination attempt. It was a complex plan to utilize the existing emergency operation plan of the German Reserve Army to seize control of the country following Hitler's death. The original Valkyrie plan was designed to suppress internal uprisings, but the conspirators, led by Stauffenberg, General Friedrich Olbricht and others, modified it to facilitate a coup d'état once Hitler was eliminated. Stauffenberg, a charismatic and determined officer who had grown increasingly appalled by the atrocities of the war and the Holocaust, became the driving force behind the assassination attempt. Having suffered severe wounds on the Eastern Front, Stauffenberg's resolve only hardened, and by 1944 he was positioned as Chief of Staff to General Fromm, commander of the Reserve Army, placing him in a unique position to carry out the attack. The fateful day chosen for the attempt was July 20, 1944, during a conference at Hitler's Wolf's Lair field headquarters in East Prussia. Stauffenberg attended the meeting carrying a briefcase containing a bomb, which he placed under the conference table near Hitler. Stauffenberg's subsequent departure, under the guise of making a phone call, marked the countdown to what was meant to be the end of Hitler's reign. The bomb detonated, killing and injuring several officers, but Hitler miraculously survived, shielded by the heavy oak conference table from the full force of the blast. The news of Hitler's survival quickly unraveled the conspirators' plans. In Berlin, where parts of the Valkyrie plan were being initiated, confusion and indecision plagued the coup's leaders. The Reserve Army was mobilized under the guise of quelling a fictitious SS coup, but as reports of Hitler's survival spread, the momentum for the takeover dissipated. Key figures hesitated, orders were rescinded, and the window of opportunity closed rapidly. In the immediate aftermath of the failed assassination, a swift and brutal crackdown ensued. Hitler, enraged and seeking retribution, unleashed the Gestapo and the SS to hunt down those involved in the plot. The failure to secure decisive support from key military figures, coupled with General Fromm's treachery, sealed their fate. Stauffenberg, Olbricht and others were summarily executed in the courtyard of the Bendler Block, the Reserve Army headquarters, in the early hours of July 21st. The purge extended far beyond the conspirators, ensnaring hundreds in a web of arrests, trials and executions. Families were torn apart, with many relatives of the plotters detained and persecuted. Prominent figures such as Field Marshal Erwin Rommel were implicated in the aftermath, compelled to meet a tragic end or face public trial and execution. The repercussions of the failed plot reverberated through the remaining months of the war as Hitler's grip on power tightened and the Nazi regime doubled down on its path of destruction. Shadows of Valor, Tresckow's crusade against the tyrant. In the heart of a war-torn Europe, beneath the veneer of Nazi Germany's military might, a conspiracy of shadows unfolded, driven by courage and a profound sense of duty. Major General Henning von Tresckow, a key figure within the German resistance, orchestrated one of the most audacious attempts to assassinate Adolf Hitler. This narrative delves into Tresckow's daring endeavors, highlighting the smuggling of a bomb onto Hitler's plane, an act that epitomized the resistance's ingenuity and bravery. Tresckow, born into a Prussian noble family with a long military tradition, was deeply entrenched in the German army's upper echelons. However, as World War II progressed, he grew increasingly disillusioned with the Nazi regime's atrocities and the catastrophic direction in which Hitler was steering Germany. Tresckow's moral conviction and strategic acumen positioned him as a linchpin in the clandestine efforts to overthrow Hitler, culminating in a series of assassination attempts that underscored the resistance's resolve. The most renowned of Tresckow's plots unfolded in March 1943, amidst the vast expanse of the Eastern Front, where the tides of war ebbed and flowed with brutal uncertainty. The plan was deceptively simple yet fraught with peril: to smuggle a bomb aboard Hitler's aircraft. Tresckow and his co-conspirator, Lieutenant Fabian von Schlabrendorf, ingeniously disguised a bomb as 2 bottles of Cointreau, a gift ostensibly meant for General Helmuth Stief at Hitler's headquarters in Rastenburg, East Prussia. The device, a time bomb ingeniously constructed, its mechanism designed to detonate mid-flight, exploiting the decrease in air pressure at higher altitude, was a testament to the conspirators' desperation and their willingness to gamble everything on the slim chance of success. Tresckow himself handed the package to Colonel Heinz Brandt, unwittingly tasked with carrying the explosive directly to Hitler. The bomb was timed to detonate over the dense forests of Belarus, ensuring no escape for the Führer from his fiery fate. With bated breath, Tresckow and his fellow conspirators watched the plane take off from the Smolensk airfield on March 13, 1943, the weight of their audacious endeavor pressing heavily upon their shoulders. Fate, however, had scripted a different outcome. Due to a malfunction, possibly caused by the cold temperatures at high altitude, the bomb failed to explode. The plane landed safely at its destination, and with it, the hopes of Tresckow and his comrades plummeted. Tresckow famously remarked, "The assassination must be attempted, coûte que coûte. Even if it fails, we must take action in Berlin, for the practical consequences are all the same if we perish or not." This failed attempt did not deter Tresckow. Rather, it became a prelude to further plots, each more desperate than the last. Tresckow's involvement in the resistance deepened, culminating in his connection to Operation Valkyrie and the July 20th plot of 1944. Though he was not directly involved in the planning of Stauffenberg's attempt on Hitler's life, Tresckow's earlier efforts had laid the groundwork for this ultimate act of defiance. As he once poignantly stated, "The important thing now is not that we live, but that the German people might be liberated from the curse of this maniac." Shadows over the Reich, the hidden war against Hitler. In the heart of World War II, beneath the ostensible unity of Nazi Germany, a clandestine struggle raged. Operation Spark, a bold initiative by the Schwarze Kapelle, or Black Orchestra, sought to extinguish the flame of tyranny kindled by Adolf Hitler. This group of German army officers and political conservatives, disillusioned by the Führer's ruinous path, conspired to catalyze change from within. At the helm of this audacious plot was Major General Henning von Tresckow, a man whose conviction in the cause of freedom was as unwavering as his loyalty to Germany. The seeds of discontent were sown deep within the hearts of these men as early as 1941. The disastrous defeat at Stalingrad, setbacks in North Africa, and the relentless Allied bombing campaign had begun to erode the faith of many Germans in the Nazi regime. The conspirators, recognizing the shifting tide, deemed it time for the spark to ignite a coup d'etat. Among them were key figures like General Friedrich Olbricht, who commanded the Ersatzheer, replacement army, and Lieutenant Fabian von Schlabrendorf, a pivotal operations officer, alongside a cadre of determined officers like Colonel Rudolf Christoph von Gersdorf and Major Georg von Boselager. The plot's intricacy was matched only by its audacity. Various schemes were devised, each more daring than the last, weaving a tapestry of resistance that stretched from the Eastern Front to the very heart of Berlin. One such plan unfolded in the winter of 1943 at Hitler's field headquarters near Vinnytsia, Ukraine. The conspirators had prepared multiple options to target Hitler during a visit to Army Group Center's headquarters near Smolensk. However, the direct confrontation and the moral quandaries of shooting an unarmed man led them to dismiss these options in favor of an elaborate scheme involving a time bomb. As the war dragged on, the conspirators' efforts became increasingly desperate. In March 1943, a display of captured Soviet weaponry in Berlin presented a new opportunity. Colonel Gersdorf volunteered for a daring endeavor, intending to stand close to Hitler during his visit to the exhibit and trigger explosives concealed within his attire. The plan, however, unraveled as Hitler, ever unpredictable, curtailed his visit, leaving before the timed detonation could occur. Gersdorf's quick thinking averted disaster, but the failure underscored the immense challenges faced by the conspirators. Another plot unfolded with the introduction of a new winter uniform for the German army, an event anticipated with great interest by the Nazi leadership. Captain Axel Freiherr von dem Busche, prepared to model the uniform, intended to carry explosives to eliminate the Nazi top brass. Fate, however, intervened once more as an Allied air raid destroyed the uniforms, and subsequent rescheduling conflicts further thwarted the plan. The mantle was passed to Captain Ewald von Kleist, yet this effort too was stymied by unforeseen delays. The saga of Operation Spark reached a climax in early 1944 with Captain Eberhard von Breitenbuch's plan to confront Hitler directly during a briefing. Armed with a concealed pistol, Breitenbuch was determined to act, but a last-minute directive from Hitler, excluding junior officers from briefings, nullified the attempt. In the shadows of the Wolf's Lair, the conspirators' resolve led to one final act of defiance. A bomb was smuggled into the fortress, hidden within a water tower. The premature detonation of the bomb weeks later sent shockwaves through the Nazi high command, prompting an investigation that narrowly skirted exposure of the broader conspiracy. Shadows over the Third Reich, the untold story of Operation Foxley. In the throes of World War II, amidst the strategy rooms and secret operations that spanned the globe, there was one plan that stood out for its audacity and its potential to change the course of history: Operation Foxley. Conceived in 1944 by the British Special Operations Executive, SOE, this bold strategy aimed to do what many had deemed impossible: assassinate Adolf Hitler. The origins of Operation Foxley can be traced back to earlier, less feasible attempts by the British to eliminate the Führer. Among the initial schemes was a daring plan to bomb the special train, initially named America and later renamed Brandenburg, which Hitler frequently traveled in. The SOE, leveraging its expertise in derailing trains with explosives, contemplated this approach but soon abandoned it due to the unpredictability of Hitler's movements. The stations were only informed of his arrival mere minutes in advance, rendering the plan impractical. Another ambitious idea involved introducing a tasteless but lethal poison into the water supply aboard Hitler's train. However, this too was deemed overly complicated, requiring an insider's help, a commodity too rare and risky to rely upon in such high-stakes endeavors. As these earlier plans fell by the wayside, the SOE shifted its focus towards a method that seemed more promising: a sniper attack. The summer of 1944 brought an unexpected break when a German, once part of Hitler's personal guard at the Berghof, his Alpine retreat, was captured in Normandy. This prisoner disclosed that Hitler indulged in a solitary morning walk around the Berghof premises, presenting a potential vulnerability. During these walks, Hitler preferred solitude, wandering close to the woods and away from the vigilant eyes of sentry posts. a habit that offered a unique opportunity for an assassination. The intricacies of Operation Foxley were as daring as its goal. The plan was to deploy a German-speaking Pole alongside a British sniper into Austria, parachuting them into enemy territory with the mission of navigating their way to Hitler's secluded walk path. An inside man, identified only as Heidenthaler, a Salzburg shopkeeper with a strong aversion to the Nazi regime, was recruited to assist. Heidenthaler's task was to provide shelter for the agents and facilitate their disguise as German mountain troops, ensuring their seamless infiltration to Berchtesgaden and ultimately to their vantage point for the assassination. Preparations for the operation were meticulous. The chosen sniper underwent extensive training, honing his skills by firing at moving targets designed to mimic Hitler's anticipated movements. Armed with an accurized Kar-98K rifle, equipped with a Mauser telescopic sight and a silenced Luger pistol, the sniper was prepared for the task at hand. The Luger, a silent testament to the operation's depth of planning, is now displayed at the Combined Military Services Museum in Malden, Essex. Despite the operation's careful planning and the high-level support it garnered from figures like Sir Gerald Templar and Prime Minister Winston Churchill, Operation Foxley was never executed. Hitler's last departure from the Berghof on the 14th of July 1944, followed closely by the July 20th plot, an internal attempt on his life by anti-Nazi Wehrmacht officers, rendered the operation unnecessary. Shadows of disloyalty, the twilight acts of Himmler and Göring. As the Third Reich's fortress of tyranny began to crumble under the relentless advance of Allied forces, the loyalty of Adolf Hitler's inner circle was put to the ultimate test. Among the most shocking instances of betrayal were the actions of Heinrich Himmler and Hermann Göring, two of Hitler's most formidable lieutenants, whose clandestine overtures to the Allies marked a profound rupture in the Nazi hierarchy. These acts of treachery, executed in the dying days of the war, reveal the desperation and disintegration within the upper echelons of Nazi power. Heinrich Himmler, the architect of the Holocaust and head of the SS, embarked on a covert mission to secure a place for himself in a post-war Europe. By early 1945, as Soviet forces closed in on Berlin, Himmler recognized the inevitability of Germany's defeat. In a series of secret negotiations, most notably with the Swedish Count Folke Bernadotte in April 1945, Himmler sought to broker peace with the Western Allies, excluding the Soviet Union from any settlement. His proposal envisioned a ceasefire on the Western Front, allowing the Allies and Germany to join forces against the perceived greater threat of Bolshevism. Himmler's overtures to the Allies were predicated on his delusional belief that he could be seen as a viable negotiator, a man who, despite his central role in the Nazi regime's atrocities, could be spared from retribution. On April 21, 1945, Himmler met Bernadotte at the Hohenlichen Sanatorium, uttering the infamous words, "I am not a savage, I am the head of the German police," in a vain attempt to dissociate himself from the regime's brutalities. Yet his attempts to distance himself from the regime's crimes and position himself as a peacemaker were met with scorn and rejection by the Allies, who insisted on unconditional surrender. Parallel to Himmler's machinations, Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe and once designated as Hitler's successor, made his own bid for power as the Reich teetered on the brink. On April 23, 1945, with Hitler ensconced in his Führerbunker and Berlin encircled by Soviet forces, Göring sent a telegram from Berchtesgaden asserting his right to assume leadership of Germany. Invoking a decree from 1941 that named him Hitler's deputy in the event of the Führer's incapacity, Göring suggested that the dire situation warranted his taking command to negotiate peace with the Allies. Göring's telegram, however, was perceived by Hitler as an outright act of treachery. In the paranoia-ridden atmosphere of the bunker, Göring's move was seen as a coup attempt. Hitler, in one of his last acts of reprisal, ordered Göring's arrest and stripped him of all titles and positions. The man who had once stood at the pinnacle of Nazi power was reduced to a prisoner within his own crumbling empire, his dreams of leadership and negotiation with the Allies dashed. The last stand, Berlin under siege. In the shadowed final chapter of World War II, as April 1945 dawned, the Soviet Union's Red Army launched its colossal offensive against Berlin, marking the beginning of the end for Adolf Hitler's Third Reich. With over 2.5 million soldiers, the forces under Marshals Georgy Zhukov and Ivan Konev converged on the city, unleashing a barrage of artillery that heralded doom for the Nazi regime. The once proud capital was set to become a battleground, its fate sealed by the encircling Soviet phalanx that sought to extinguish the last flicker of Nazi resistance. Berlin, transformed into a fortress of desperation, bore the scars of relentless combat. Civilians, alongside hastily assembled units of the Volkssturm and remnants of the Wehrmacht, were thrust into the chaos of urban warfare, fighting street by street against the Soviet tide. The cityscape itself, once a symbol of Nazi power, lay in ruins, a tangible testament to the folly of Hitler's ambitions. Amidst this devastation, the German people endured a hellish existence, trapped in the crossfire of an increasingly hopeless struggle for survival. Beneath the rubble-strewn streets, in the claustrophobic confines of the Führerbunker, Hitler oscillated between rage and despair. Surrounded by his most loyal followers, he was a leader increasingly divorced from the reality of the war's outcome. In those final days, the bunker was the scene of bizarre contrasts, strategic meetings discussing non-existent divisions and birthday celebrations amidst the cacophony of bombardment. Hitler's proclamation, "I shall remain in Berlin," so as to partake of even the slightest possibility of any favorable turn of events, epitomized his delusional state, even as his empire crumbled above him. The defense of Berlin was characterized by a tragic blend of valor and futility. Young boys of the Hitler Youth and elderly men, armed with little more than Panzerfaust anti-tank weapons, made a stand against the Soviet armor, their sacrifice a poignant testament to the manipulation and exploitation of the German people by the Nazi regime. Stories abound of makeshift barricades and fierce house-to-house fighting, a testament to the desperation and determination of those called upon to defend the city. Yet for many, the fight was not for the Führer or the Reich, but for survival amid the ruins of their homeland. The raising of the Soviet flag over the Reichstag on May 2, 1945, was a symbolic act of victory, a signal that the battle for Berlin, and with it the war in Europe, was nearing its end. The city's surrender was chaotic, a piecemeal capitulation that gradually coalesced into the unconditional surrender of all German forces on May 8, 1945. This moment, signaling the unequivocal end of the Third Reich, was epitomized by Zhukov's declaration, "The history of war does not know a more crushing defeat for Germany." The final chapter, unraveling the mystery of Hitler's demise. In the twilight of the Second World War, as the Allies pressed into the heart of Berlin, one of history's most notorious figures, Adolf Hitler, faced his inevitable downfall within the claustrophobic confines of his Führerbunker. This underground sanctuary, a grim setting for the final act of the Third Reich's architect, bore witness to the culmination of Hitler's reign of terror. The days leading to his last moments were a macabre blend of desperation, delusion, and the dark realization that the war was lost. April 1945, Berlin was a city under siege. The Red Army was closing in, and the air was thick with the anticipation of defeat. Inside the bunker, Hitler, alongside a loyal retinue including Eva Braun, Joseph Goebbels, Martin Bormann, and others, lived in a state of heightened paranoia and declining hope. These final inhabitants of Hitler's subterranean refuge were the last witnesses to the regime's death throes. As the Allies encircled Berlin, Hitler's psychological state deteriorated. Reports from those inside the bunker depicted a man oscillating between fits of rage and somber resignation. He married Eva Braun in a brief ceremony, a futile attempt at normalcy amidst chaos. The union, however, was short-lived. Within 40 hours, both would choose to face their end rather than surrender. The official narrative, as recorded by those who emerged from the bunker, tells us that on April 30th, 1945, Hitler and Braun secluded themselves in a private room. Later, their lifeless forms were discovered, marking the end of a dictator's life and the beginning of a myriad of mysteries that would fuel speculation for decades. The aftermath of Hitler's departure was shrouded in secrecy and haste. His body, along with Braun's, was purportedly cremated in the Reich Chancellery Garden, an act witnessed by a select few. This hurried and somewhat botched attempt at a funeral pyre left many questions unanswered, providing fertile ground for conspiracy theories to take root. One of the most persistent conspiracies posits that Hitler, in fact, escaped the besieged capital. Proponents of this theory argue that the body said to be Hitler's was a double, a common practice among high-ranking officials during the war. They speculate that, with the help of loyalists, Hitler fled to South America, where he lived in anonymity. This theory was bolstered by sightings and rumors, including claims of submarines landing on Argentine shores in the weeks following the war. However, despite the romantic allure of such tales, they remain unsupported by credible evidence and gained traction in the post-war years, fueled by the discovery of Nazi enclaves in countries like Argentina and Brazil. However, despite extensive investigations, no concrete evidence has ever been found to substantiate these claims. Another theory suggests that Hitler's demise was orchestrated by the Allies, a narrative that paints a picture of a covert operation to infiltrate the bunker and eliminate the Führer. This version of events, though popularized in novels and films, lacks any credible historical evidence and is widely regarded by historians as fanciful. Perhaps the most controversial conspiracy revolves around the Soviet Union's role. When Soviet troops captured the Reich Chancellery, they reportedly found Hitler's remains, which were then subjected to a series of secretive autopsies. Stalin himself fueled speculation by telling Western leaders that Hitler had escaped. The Soviets, for years, remained ambiguous about what they had discovered, leading to speculation that they had manipulated evidence to serve their post-war narrative. It was not until 1970 that the Soviet Union admitted to having found what they believed to be Hitler's remains, further complicating the narrative. In the years following the war, these theories and others like them have been explored, dissected, and debated by historians, conspiracy theorists, and the public alike. Despite the allure of these narratives, the consensus among scholars, based on available evidence, remains that Hitler met his end in that Berlin bunker. After the storm, the echoes of a dictator's demise. In the shadowy aftermath of April 30th, 1945, as Adolf Hitler's end became public knowledge, the world found itself at a historic crossroads. The announcement, which reached the far corners of a war-torn globe, was met with a blend of relief and somber contemplation. The streets of Allied countries buzzed with a cautious optimism, encapsulated by Winston Churchill's declaration, "So far as Hitler is concerned, I should say that we might perhaps thank God that he has passed into oblivion." Yet amid the celebrations, there was a palpable sense of the immense task of rebuilding that lay ahead. The inner circle of the Third Reich, those who had remained in the bunker till the end, met varied fates, each a footnote to the regime's collapse. Joseph Goebbels, after poisoning his 6 progeny, took a drastic step with his wife Magda on May 1st, 1945, to escape facing the consequences of their actions, a final act of fealty to Hitler. Heinrich Himmler's attempt to flee in disguise concluded with his capture and subsequent decision to avoid capture consequences on May 23, 1945, in Lüneburg, Germany. Hermann Göring, captured by the Allies, was found guilty at the Nuremberg trials, but evaded the hangman's noose by ingesting cyanide on October 15, 1946. These episodes closed the chapters on the lives of those who had orchestrated some of the darkest pages of human history. The Nuremberg trials, commencing in November 1945, stood as a monumental reckoning with the horrors of the Nazi regime. It was here, in the city symbolically chosen for its significance to the Nazi Party, that the world sought to administer justice. The trials not only highlighted the egregious crimes committed, but also set unprecedented legal precedents, such as the principles of international law that hold leaders personally responsible for their actions. Rudolf Hess, Albert Speer, and Joachim von Ribbentrop became emblematic of the regime's highest echelons facing judgment, their sentences ranging from imprisonment to execution. The geopolitical landscape, irreversibly altered by Hitler's demise, saw the division of Germany and the onset of the Cold War. The establishment of the United Nations on October 24, 1945, represented a collective resolve to forge a path toward peace and cooperation, a stark contrast to the isolationist policies that had preceded the war. The UN's creation embodied the aspiration, in the words of its charter, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. The task of rebuilding extended beyond the physical to the moral and ideological. Denazification efforts sought to cleanse German and Austrian society of Nazi influence, a process met with varying degrees of success and resistance. Meanwhile, the world grappled with the enormity of the Holocaust, which led to significant movements in Holocaust education and remembrance. The establishment of Israel in 1948, providing a haven for survivors, underscored the global response to the genocide's atrocities. Cultural responses to the legacy of Hitler's reign were profound and varied. Literature, film, and art delved into themes of tyranny, resilience, and the human capacity for both evil and redemption. Anne Frank's diary, published posthumously in 1947, and Elie Wiesel's Night, published in 1956, offered personal, harrowing accounts of survival and loss, reminding the world of the human stories behind the historical events. As the immediate aftermath of Hitler's end unfolded, the world embarked on a journey of reflection and reconstruction. The Marshall Plan, initiated in 1948, symbolized the commitment to rebuild Europe, not just in infrastructure, but in spirit, aiming to prevent the resurgence of the forces that had led to the war. The plan's success in revitalizing European economies and fostering cooperation was a testament to the lessons learned from the war's devastation. As we delve into the shadows of history, threading through the intricate tapestry woven by fate and human endeavor, we have journeyed across the precipice of moments that could have altered the course of our world. From the early plots within the beer halls of Munich to the explosive attempt by Klaus von Stauffenberg on July 20, 1944, each story is a testament to the courage and conviction of those who dared to stand against the darkness of their times. These tales, embroidered with the names of Klaus von Stauffenberg, Georg Elser, and others, remind us of the fragility of tyranny against the unyielding spirit of resistance. In the words of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a theologian and anti-Nazi dissident, "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act." This quote encapsulates the essence of our journey today, a reminder that the act of defiance in the face of overwhelming darkness is a profound statement of our humanity. As we bid farewell to these tales of valor and defiance, let us carry forward the lesson that history is not just a series of events, but a call to each of us to stand for what is just and right. Thank you for joining us on this historical odyssey. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and may your curiosity always lead you to the light.